Hello, and welcome to my final project on the refugee crisis, specifically with women and children in the Middle East. There's a lot going on there, and has been for a really long time, so that's what really sparked my interest because I didn't know much about it. First, we'll start with what a refugee is, which is a person who has been forced to leave their country in order to escape war, violence, persecution, or even a natural disaster sometimes. So the issue at the moment is that many women and children in the Middle East region are migrating to a lot of other places, nearby countries, to escape the multitude of dangers they're experiencing. We will specifically highlight the struggles of the Syrian refugees, who are refugees of violence and war that erupted about 10 years ago and is still continuing on. And also what I noticed is that there are actually about 8 different SDGs that the refugees of Syria are lacking, which we will talk about a little bit more as we get into the presentation. Let's talk a little bit about what started the Syrian conflict in that country. So a lot of the citizens of the city Dara noticed that a lot of neighboring countries were protesting against their own repressive rulers, and so they wanted to do so themselves. As a result, the Syrian government used deadly force to crush those protests and then ultimately use excessive force citizens against them across the nation. Their ruler Assad was really behind push all of this to resign after that against his own citizens, which is really the reason why women and children are at risk specifically is that they face lack of protection, and that results in a lot of family separation. And they also face a multitude of health risks, both physically and mentally. Especially pregnant women are extremely vulnerable when on these excursions. And then they can also face a lot of gender-based violence, such as exploitation and other sexual crimes against them. And then migrant children are specifically at risk for some other reasons. Often children become displaced because of the lack of safe pathways that are available to them. And on many occasions, mothers will send their children or child on another alternative pathway than them as an attempt to protect them from any dangers. And that's not always what happens. So when they're alone and vulnerable, they can be forced into child labor, early marriage, or subjected to sex trafficking. But we'll talk about a little bit more about the child marriage later on. So the refugees leaving Syria are going to 3 main places, which is Turkey, Lebanon, and Jordan, with a total of 3.3 million total misplaced refugees. And we'll talk about why Jordan is one of the main concerns, even though they're the third most popular place to go for these refugees. So even on a quote-unquote successful voyage, once they've arrived in either 3 of these countries, they are very susceptible to missing out on education and health care because they are not citizens of these countries. They are forced to learn the language and culture of these foreign places, which can result in them enduring lasting psychological effects and not being able to reach their full potential, just because it's really new and a very stressful thing to go through for them. And here in the bottom corner, we have a statistic showing that 90,000% of people from Jordan do not have education access, which is very unfortunate. And there's even less in Lebanon and Turkey. So this is just going to highlight why Jordan is the country that is the biggest concern. So 19.5% of women and children refugees live in camps there. Jordan itself as a country is really struggling economically, which means less education opportunities for young women and children, which means more dropout rates, and that results in more child labor. And then also more child marriages. Refugees living in Jordan are 3 times more likely to become a child bride than in Jordan than they are in Syria. And then also I read that because Jordan's economics were going down so low, they were providing health care to a lot of the refugees, but then they did revoke that from them, also charging twice the amount that Jordan citizens would have to pay for. So that's just completely unreasonable for them to have to pay that when they barely have a job or education. So I feel like a lot of people would ask why prioritize just the women and children instead of all refugees in general, but the answer to that is men don't need to be protected much from child marriages. They are also less vulnerable when traveling across borders because, a lot of people assume they can defend themselves. Child marriages result in less access to reproductive health and rights in the long run. And women in general have less access to education, in general, in a general society. And it's even more in terms of refugees. So that is the reason why they should be prioritized at the moment.